Human Trafficking, Slavery in the Middle East and AML by Sean Miller.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean Miller. I'm a member of the International Compliance Association and I'm ACAMS certified. And I would like to welcome you to my sample presentation on human trafficking, slavery in the Middle East and anti-money laundering. I hope you enjoy my sample presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Slavery did not end with abolition in the 19th century. The practice still continues today in one form or another in every country of the world. From women forced into prostitution, children and adults forced to work in agriculture, domestic work, or factories, and sweatshops, producing goods for global supply chains, entire families forced to work for nothing to pay off generational debts, or girls forced to marry older men, the legal practice still blights the contemporary world. This is a global problem, as you can see by this global heat map, this global incidence heat map, where high is in red, orange, low would be yellow and white colors. The estimated number of people in modern slavery globally is of today approximately 45.8 million people. 58% of those living in slavery are in these 5 countries: India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Uzbekistan. As you can see by this chart, slavery is a global problem that predominantly affects these countries. Not only these countries, but also Western countries such as UK and the United States as well. The country where traffic victims are most likely to end up are Nigeria, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Japan, Brazil, Netherlands, France, United Kingdom, USA, and Cambodia. Thus, as you can see, this is not only a regional problem associated with regional areas and sort of higher risk hot country areas, but this is a global problem. The types of slavery endured by the suffering are exploitation and extortion of smuggled migrants, exploitation of forced labor, forced begging and servitude, exploitation of domestic workers, transactional marriages, and prostitution. As you can see by this picture, one person is trafficked every 30 seconds. There are 27 million victims worldwide. These trafficked individuals could be in our restaurants, our hotels, and even close by in our neighborhoods, near our backyards. The people from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Thailand, etc. These peoples migrate voluntarily for domestic work on the basis of employment agencies' promises of lucrative jobs. However, upon entering the country, they find themselves deceived and enslaved within the bounds of a legal sponsorship system, which is in effect slavery. The passports are taken away from the workers at the airport when they arrive, and they are given directly to the employer, agency, or employer along with these identification documents. So, by withholding the passport, the employer immobilizes and, in effect, imprisons the worker. These domestic workers labor in isolation in homes and are subject to confinement, long work hours, food deprivation, sleeping on floors, lack of privacy, withholding of wages, physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. And this is happening today in the 21st century, in our enlightened 21st century. However, if they complain to the police, the employers often accuse them of absconding and theft, and they could be incarcerated. Love for sale. Reports of wealthy men from Gulf countries roaming refugee camps in Jordan have become more common and prevalent. So these people, desperate to support themselves and their families, Syrian families have been known to sell their young daughters using temporary marriages. These wealthy individuals from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait actually traveled to Egypt to purchase these women and girls for temporary marriages, and in some cases these are facilitated and approved by parents and guardians. Girls as young as 10, so these are girls as young as 10, have been sold in this manner and later found in the streets of the men's home countries with absolutely no way to return to their families and no one willing to take them in. So these children, as I said, girls possibly as young as 10, are throwaway kids, used, abused, and discarded when the men are done with them. Forced prostitution has grown along with the conflict and destabilization of governments in the Middle East. Syrian women who think they'll become second wives to Egyptian men instead find themselves in forced prostitution, labor, or begging. So women who have been trafficked into prostitution are liable to be prosecuted for adultery, punishable by death. For these women, prostitution or death are the only choices. Therefore, they see that they do not receive support of law or support from the police. Child sex trafficking, child brides, and child stories, indeed horrific. You can see by this picture, this salesman states that the price differs if she has blue eyes. Utterly shocking and cruel. Cairo, Alexandria, and Luxor have an estimated 200,000 to 1 million street children who are subject to sex trafficking as well as forced begging. Whilst Egypt has laws on its books to prevent child trafficking, the identification of traffickers and investigation and prosecution of these cases lag. In effect, the traffickers get away with it. In Iraq, there are no efforts to prosecute traffickers, although there may be shelters for victims and laws against trafficking. However, there are still no efforts to prosecute these traffickers. The victims themselves are treated as criminals and imprisoned, and the families who sell their daughters into prostitution do not take them back at all. Yemen is a country of child victims with approximately 1.7 million laborers under the age of 14, some subject to forced labor. These become child laborers, beggars, brides, and soldiers. These children, and I state, these children have little to hope for. The women and children from Ethiopia and Somalia migrate to Yemen in an effort to reach wealthy Gulf countries to improve their lifestyle. Instead, upon arrival, they are exploited and abused. Yemeni and Saudi gangs traffic children, forced into prostitution, child sex, or child soldering. And once again, these are children between the ages of 10 and 14. So, families in Yemen send their children to support militant rebels. The boys are recruited by Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations in the Arabian Peninsula. Girls as young as 15 are put in hotels and clubs for prostitution. Girls as young as 8, and I say this again, girls as young as 8 are sold as brides, and at least one has died recently from internal injuries on the wedding night. Utterly horrific and cruel. Children are therefore forced into armed conflict and are used as human shields, despite a law actually prohibiting the recruitment of children under the age of 18. Syria is known as a country of child victims, where conflict and chaos in the area has led to a group of riser gangs. The Syrian government and the government-affiliated militias and non-state armed groups all use child soldiers. However, the Syrian government has pledged to stop child soldering, but however continues to use child soldering under the age of 18 in its armed forces, and in some cases children as young as 13 have been documented at checkpoints. ISIS women and children slaves. The Islamic State, Daesh, is holding about 3,500 people as slaves in Iraq, according to a UN report. Most of these detained are women and children from Iraqi's Yazidi community. These being held are predominantly women and children and come primarily from the Yazidi community, but a number are also from other ethnic and religious minority communities. So according to the UN, Islamic State jihadists have abducted thousands of women and girls as young as 12 years old, and I repeat 12 years old, selling them as sex slaves or giving them to militants as actual rewards. This is a picture of someone taking their child for a walk in the park. These silhouettes are the invisible people who are victims of human slavery and human trafficking. According to the International Labour Organization, the annual profits generated can be estimated at approximately 4 billion. So this is the annual profit generated by trafficked people in forced economic exploitation. From forced commercial sexual exploitation, the profits are at about 28 billion. So the total illicit profits of all forced labor and trafficking and commercial sex exploitation is estimated to be around 32 billion per year. So, trafficking in human beings is considered to be one of the most leading criminal enterprises and is believed to affect virtually all countries around the globe. According to the UN, reported trafficking in humans originated from 127 countries and exploitation in 137 countries worldwide from 1996 to 2003. With regard to the red flags associated with the with human trafficking and slavery are similar to the red flags associated with other types of money laundering. For instance, a common mobile phone number, address, and employment references, frequent money transfer to high-risk countries, concentration of risk nationalities among the opening of accounts, the rapid withdrawal of money from one ATM and several ATMs in close proximity, frequent deposits or withdrawals with no apparent business source, etc., etc. These are some of the red flags associated with this particular activity, and these red flags can be inbuilt into transaction monitoring systems in order to mitigate against this horrific problem of human slavery and human trafficking. So, traffickers routinely use false promises and fraudulent representations to lure and recruit victims with fancy adverts, promises of cash, promises of fame, promises of celebrity, promises of an easier life. So once the victim is obtained, the traffickers will often resort to coercion and force to exert their control. Traffickers may falsely advertise that the employees are looking for models to lure potential victims and then use coercion and force to compel the victims to engage in commercial sex acts, basically to become prostitutes. So in this scenario, coercion, force, and fraud are all methods used to commit the crime of sex trafficking in this particular example. And this particular example is a recognized example and has been researched via FATF typologies. There are a number of detection challenges faced by the financial institutions as well as the police. So, human trafficking is not easy to find because it takes many forms, and it may be confused with alien smuggling. Human trafficking is a hidden crime. The victimization occurs behind closed doors or away from our eyes. The schemes used by traffickers to recruit, obtain, or maintain victims vary in each case. As well as fourth, victims are much less likely to report human trafficking due to the fact that they are simply scared. So, what can financial institutions and banks do to combat this problem? They need to keep the problem and the extent of the seriousness of this alive through continuing education. And at the frontline level, education awareness is important. Education awareness and training. For example, if a girl is brought to the bank by someone else, then this could be an indicator of a high risk activity, and the frontline staff should be aware that this is a suspicious activity. The second line is for AML investigators and transaction monitoring teams to be alert to what they are seeing in the transaction profiles, and I've mentioned a few red alerts previously. It is imperative that the financial institutions and banks continue to share best practices, latest indicators, trends, and what to particularly look out for, as sharing of information is of crucial importance. The International Labour Organization also has a number of steps as well that they wish to be implemented. For example, to create and enforce penal and labour codes for these crimes, to enforce existing labour laws, and to create and enforce penal and labour codes for physical, mental, and sexual abuse of domestic workers, as well as to improve identification of victims of trafficking through better education and training of these frontline workers, and to improve interdepartmental cooperation so labour and law officials, as well as banks, have constant communication about ongoing investigations, and to establish unannounced labour inspections accompanied by interpreters who can speak directly with employees about working conditions.